Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with several cards using the STAMPtember limited edition Tim Holtz stamp set. This is the one everybody waits for. This is the one that sells out insanely fast. And this year will be no exception. I am completely certain because this set's absolutely hilarious. So as always, I could not decide what image to focus on, anything like that, so I ended up making a bunch of cards. And I made them all Slimline, because why not? So I'm starting with distress watercolor paper, and I had already die cut a rectangle with one of Simon's nested, Slimline nested rectangles wafer dies. And I'm stamping this cat from the set that is wrapped up in Christmas lights. I stamped him 3 times. And the funny thing is when I started this, I was originally going to make this a landscape card, and then at the end decide to flip it to a portrait card, but I'll get to that later. So I've stamped the images with Ranger's Archival ink, and then I'm doing some really simple watercoloring, purposely keeping it messy. These images kind of tend to just the messy nature of them, you know, the way they're drawn and also the crazy look of them. It just works. So right now I'm only watercoloring in the cats themselves, and I just used pumice stone and hickory smoke distress inks and a little bit of worn lipstick and then a tiny little bit of tumbled glass for the eyes, and watercolored those in with my little Tim Holtz water brush. And then there's this little kind of speckly snowflake stamp in the set, and I'm just inking that up with the tumbled glass ink and just stamping it all over, like just all around these little images, just to give it a little extra something. And then to color in the Christmas lights, I went with Copic markers. I could have just used more distress inks, but I really wanted the color just to be a little more intense and not have to like layer, you know, the distress inks or anything like that. And I didn't do any actual really blending. I'm just kind of dabbing the markers because I am coloring on this Ranger watercolor paper, which you can obviously color with Copics on. If you hold the marker too long on it though, the color will start, like the paper will just start to really suck in that color. But again, I'm not doing like any sort of blending. I'm not doing large areas. I'm basically just dabbing the markers into each little light bulb here. And I went with basically a rainbow of colors and used 2 shades of each color just to give it that little extra something. And I also dotted the colors kind of around the bulbs, kind of to give that idea of them being lit. So I just went around and just filled them all in really randomly, sped this up in editing. I'm honestly not 100% sure if Ranger's Archival ink would work like in normal times with Copic markers, just because of the nature of the ink, but it is a really nice ink. And this one was a brand new one that I bought a couple months ago, and I just opened it when I did these videos. I do say I really like it for the watercoloring and like stamping these images. It's stamped so insanely crisp, just perfect. So anywho, colored in all of the bulbs with these Copics, dotted all around the edges with the same colors I was using for each bulb. And then I went in with my Tonic Glitter Gloss Aqua Shimmer pen and added that to the bulb. So there's going to be nice, fun, like glitter effect to all of them. So went along, filled in all of those. And then I took my glossy accents and I'm going to cover the eyeballs of all these little cats. And I'm also going to cover all of the little light bulbs as well. Just tiny little dabs. Didn't take very long. Just went along, added that because it just gives it that glossy finish. So once that's all done, I'm going to have to set this aside and let it dry, which didn't take too long because I'm just adding like such small amounts of the glossy accents that it really doesn't take long at all. But I set that aside to dry. For the sentiments, I am going to stamp them onto just black cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss them. When I was first doing this first card, my natural instinct was to try and stamp everything as straight as possible because I was going to trim it out with my paper trimmer. I was very, you know, trying to get everything lined up, but I ended up changing with that too. So I stamped the images, which is clear embossing ink, and I'm heat embossing them with Ranger's super fine detail white embossing powder. This one is extremely fine. I use it for things like this, like little tiny words and things like this. This is the embossing powder to go for. So melted all that with my heat tool, and then decided rather than fiddling with my paper trimmer and lining things up, I'm going to trim these out with scissors. Again, the types of images and just the way everything starts evolving, it makes it all more fun. I want things to be a little more quirky. I'm not going to stress out about it. And it just works. You know, everything's a little off kilter, and I'm going to take it a step further with all of these cards as well. So I just went along and trimmed these with my scissors, just eyeballing it and purposely not trying to get them straight. So I'm going to trim these out, and I decided with all my cards I'm going to use multiple sentiments from this set because, again, this set, not just the images but also the sentiments, just made me laugh. And I couldn't decide, you know, with just one sentiment to use. So I was like, let's just use them all. So I also roughed up the edges of this cardstock. Tim Holtz actually has a tool, and I have it around here somewhere, but of course I couldn't find it. This little paper distressor tool that you can just run along the edges of your cardstock, and it roughs it up so you don't have to use your fingernail. But that's what I just did. I just used my fingernail, but the tool would have done much better. But again, I'm thinking, you know, cats destroying everything. So I kind of ripped up and crumpled the edges of the cardstock. And then with this card, I actually added, just quickly hand drew in kind of little action lines, kind of to make it look like he's spinning in the air with all these bulbs. So I just used a really fine point Sharpie for that and just added little curved movement lines around each of these images. So I did that. And then once I was happy with that, I'm going to rough up the edges, like literally tearing it in some parts. Just, again, to give it that distressed look. So rolled up some of the edges, roughed them up. Again, that little paper distressor tool, if you're not wanting to mess up your fingernails, etc., is definitely the way to go because it makes it a lot faster than fiddling with it, you know, manually. So roughed up those edges. And then on the inside of the card, I stamped the same image again, and then I'm going to adhere the meowy Christmas sentiment from the set. And then I'm going to adhere the card front to the card base, and then the sentiments I'm just going to pop up with a few little foam squares. So yeah, the one says shiny things everywhere. Am I just supposed to let that happen? So yeah. And then the other one, have you learned nothing from last year's tree? Oh, humbug. Like, yeah, they're just perfect with these little characters. So pop those into place with the foam dimensions, and that finishes off card number 1. So like I had mentioned, all these cards are slimline cards. So they're 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline cards. And I made them from Simon Says Stamps Fog cardstock. I kind of wanted the same sort of color as the, like what I colored the cats, and also just neutral. So that was card number 1. For card number 2, I am stamping this little critter onto just another piece of Ranger's Distress watercolor paper with the Archival jet black ink. So stamped him. I'm going to color him the exact same as the other one. I'm just working with my little Waffle Flower mini media mat, just smushing the inks onto this. I could have been using my Tim Holtz glass mat. I haven't pulled that out. Anyway, I'm having troubles figuring out my lighting situation. The glare from my sad little overhead lights make it really difficult to film. So anywho, working with my little media mat, and again, pumice stone, hickory smoke, some tumbled glass, a little bit of worn lipstick, and then I bring in some candied apple and some pine needles distress inks. And just quickly watercoloring these in, just picking up the color with my little water brush. And I basically mixed the pumice stone and the hickory smoke to watercolor in all of these cats. And then I added a tiny bit of worn lipstick to his little cheeks. And then with this little guy, I used the pine needles for his little coffee cup here. And I'm going to use the candied apple for his little hat, and then tumbled glass for his little sweater. So then once I was done watercoloring in this image and let it dry, I quickly fussy cut it with my just detail cutting scissors. And then I took my Memento Tuxedo black marker, just the side of the marker, and quickly ran that along the edges of this. It just covers up that exposed white edge and makes everything look a little more seamless. So I have him fussy cut. And then I pulled out some Wendy Vecchi embossing paste, just put that right onto my little water media mat here. And I smushed some more of the Tumbled Glass Distress ink. And I'm just mixing that in with this embossing paste so I can tint it a nice light blue, similar to the color I painted his sweater with that Tumbled Glass ink. So I just mixed it up with my spatula, and then I smush a little bit more of the ink onto the media mat because I just wanted to add a little bit more color to that. And then mixed it up a little bit more. Once I was happy with the color of the embossing paste, I am going to use one of my Tim Holtz mini stencils. This is like the sweater pattern. And it was just, again, meant to be. Because the little, just looking at that guy while I was coloring him, I was like, I'm pretty sure I have a stencil in my stash that looks like a sweater pattern. And it did. So I placed that onto more of the Ranger Distress watercolor paper. And I just used some tape to mask off the top portion of the stencil. And I'm glad I moved the mask down a little bit of the tape because I had just enough of this embossing paste to fill in this bottom portion of the stencil. So I applied it, peeled off the stencil, wiped off my stencil and my spatula, and it's good to go. And then I also pulled out some of the Tim Holtz metallic cardstock. And on an angle, I can die cut a Slimline wafer die with that. So I die cut the red metallic cardstock with Simon's scallop frame wafer die. So I die cut that, set all that aside, and then stamped the snowflake image from the STAMPtember set with that tumbled glass ink just along the top of this panel here. And of course the embossing paste is dry by this point. So I was originally going to pop this little character up with foam tape, but when I trimmed him out, I purposely didn't trim out the little like tufts of fur that kind of peek out around his ears because I'm not going to bother fussy cutting that. So I just stamped that directly onto the card front with the Archival ink. And then I can adhere this little stamped and watercolor character right on top. So then I get those little tufts back. Because I don't know. There's something about it that just kind of makes me laugh. So I'm just going to adhere him directly on top with my KRAFT tacky glue. And then once that's adhered into place, I'm going to be able to start assembling the rest of my card here. So the sentiments, popping those up with foam tape. And same thing, use several sentiments from the set and then roughed up the edges and tore the edges a bit with my fingernails. And then I did the same thing to that frame, just kind of roughed it up and curled up some of the edges as well. Just, you know, that's what cats do. So the card base is the same as the previous one, just Simon's Fog cardstock. I'm going to stamp this little character on the inside as well, and then add that meowy Christmas sentiment to it. And then adhere my frame, and then adhere the card front panel with my KRAFT tacky glue. So just kind of fiddling till I get everything into place, and then adding that last little bit of the card front. And then once this one is adhered into place, I'm going to add a little bit of that same aqua shimmer pen just to his little coffee cup. He's got to have that little bit of bling. So I'm going to put a little bit of that into place, and then I'm going to use the glossy accents again on his eyeballs just to give it that shine. So, and also just to kind of emphasize their eyeballs, because again, these characters, you know, so many of pretty much all of Tim Holtz, like little critter stamps, all have those goofy eyes, and I love it. I don't know what it is. It's just, it makes me laugh. So as a final little like touch, I took a white gel pen and just added little dots to his hat, and that kind of finished it off. So I've got the sparkle in the cup and the texture of the embossing paste over that stencil, the metallic. It's just fun. So that's card number 2. Now we're going to go on to card number 3. Again, Ranger Distress watercolor paper here. And then I have a little scrap of some Simon masking paper. And I stamped the gift from the set onto that masking paper. And then I'm just quickly fussy cutting out these 2 masks. I'm cutting right over that little like ribbon bow. I'm not going to mask that. That's not necessary. Just need to like basically cut these 2 simple little rectangles. So I've got a couple of masks. I was thinking when I was looking at this particular cat, he looks like he's giving a dirty look to something or someone. So I wanted to do a stack of gifts to raise the height so I can stamp the little tiny bird from the set. So I've got my masks, and then kind of figuring out my little layout here. And then once I know where I'm going to place things, I am going to first stamp what will be the top gift on this pile, because this is the one that's going to appear as if it's on the top. So I stamp that first. Then I'm going to peel the backing off of one of these masks and place that right on top of the stamped image. And then I'm going to stamp this gift again right below the first one. And then once I have that stamped, I'm going to mask off this one. And then finally, once this one's masked, I can stamp the final one on what will basically be the ground of my little scene. So stamp that into place. And then I can peel these masks off and I have this little stack of gifts. So once I've got those stamped, I'm going to stamp that little birdie as if he's standing right on top of that little pile of gifts. So ink that up with the Distress or Ranger Archival ink. And then I can stamp my cat now beside that, so it looks like he's giving that bird a dirty look. So stamped him into place, and then I'm going to stamp some more gifts on the other side of this card just to kind of fill in my little scene. So got that stamped into place, and then same thing. I'm going to stamp one of the gifts closer to his feet, get that stamped, and then I will stamp or mask him off, and then do another shorter stack of little gifts here. So mask that one off, and then stamped another one off to the far left here, so it's going to look like it's kind of behind this first one, and then mask that one off, and then finally stamp one more so that that gift isn't just floating there. So got that stamped, peel off those masks, and now I've got this little scene with the gifts and the cat and the bird. So super sped this up in editing, but I did the exact same thing as the other two, just watercoloring everything with those same distress inks. The only difference with this one is I pulled in a little bit of fossilized amber and a teensy tiny bit of, I think that was carved pumpkin. I'll have links to all the distress inks I used along with all the other supplies below the video. But yeah, I use those just to color in the little bells that are tied to his tail and the teensy little like bird beak. So watercolored in all of that. Once I had it all colored in, I stamp the snowflakes again, kind of around the top of this panel with that tumbled glass distress ink. So just stamp that all over the place, just to kind of fill in the rest of this little scene. And then once I was happy with all of that, of course, I'm going to add the sentiments. And I'm also going to add some shimmer and the glossy accents like the other ones, rough up the edges with my fingers to give it that, you know, ratty little bit of distress look of these little brat cats. That's basically what they are. And then the inside of the card, stamping him with the archival ink. I'm going to stamp a little bird in the corner just because I wanted to include him as well. And then adhere the Meowie Christmas sentiment. And then once I got everything adhered, this card front to the card base, this is where I'll add the bits of shimmer and the glossy accents, because then I can just set this aside and let this dry. So I filled in a couple of the gifts with the aqua shimmer pen, and then I painted lines on the green ones just to kind of give it, you know, that pattern look. And because, again, this is, distress inks are water reactive, you can see it, like, since I've sped this up, you can literally see it, how it quickly reacts and, like, reactivates those colors. So I do wipe off the aqua shimmer pen between colors so that I'm not pulling one color into the other one. So added that also to the little bells on his tail. And then I'm going to fill in, of course, the eyes and the eye of the little bird and then the little bells with the glossy accents, and then set that aside to dry. So this will complete card number 3 in this set. So shimmery, glossy, distressed goodness. And then finally for card number 4, I have the image with the cat in the stocking. And I stamped this multiple times onto a piece of distress watercolor paper, and then quickly watercolored this in with those same distress inks. And then off camera, I'm going to trim out all of these stockings, just fussy cut them really quick and easy because it's a simple image. I just fussy cut the stocking and then edged it with the Memento Tuxedo black marker. So then I've got individual stockings for my little scene that I'm going to create. So I line them up onto another piece of distressed watercolor paper, and then I'm going to just re-stamp that one image just once, and I'm going to quickly watercolor him in, And then I'm going to adhere one of the stockings over him so that it, you know, isn't cut off on the bottom. And I stamped that little like speckled snow image. And then I quickly watercolored along the bottom. I'm just using a piece of black cardstock just to kind of give me a somewhat straight line. I was kind of thinking, like, I was originally gonna like stencil mantelpiece, all that sort of thing, but I thought, no, there's enough going on. So I just quickly did a watercolor with the pumice stone just to kind of give a bit of something for these stockings to technically be hanging from. So adhered all of them into place with the KRAFT tacky glue, and then decided to add little mini brads just to the corner of each stocking to kind of make it look like they're hanging in place. So I pulled a few of those out and I just pierced holes into the corner of each of these stockings with my Tim Holtz craft pick. So pierced that through and then threaded through the tiny little white mini brad. And that just kind of gives it that little extra something. I haven't used brads in eons. Eons. So anyway, I'm glad I still had this pack sitting here though. So poked the holes through and then pressed the backs down on the back of this. And then same thing, bunch of sentiments from the set. I'm going to pop these into place with some foam tape again, or like little foam adhesive squares. And then once I've got all of these sentiments in place, I'm going to rough up all those edges again, curl them up, tear them a little bit here and there, just pulling up all those little edges and curling the corners a bit. And I die cut another frame from the Metallic Jewels cardstock and roughed up the edges of that as well. And then my card base, I'm going to stamp the inside with that little character in the stocking and add the Meowie Christmas sentiment. Kept all the insides just simple. They had to have something in them though. So adhered that into place, and then I can adhere my little frame, and then I'll adhere the card front. And then once the card front's in place, I'm going to add again the aqua shimmer to the stockings, just to give them, you just got to have that little bit of bling. So adhered this into place, added the aqua shimmer, and then of course I'll add a little bit of the glossy accents to his eyes, and I also painted it right over that little candy cane that's with him in the stocking, just to, you know, complete this whole little look. So once this one's done and dry, that completes my set of 4 cards using the STAMPtember set. Like I mentioned earlier on, this set sells out like crazy. I know, like, I'm recording this voiceover early. I know Tim Holtz is going to do a live video. He always posts them on his YouTube and then or on his Facebook, and then I think he posts them to YouTube as well. But I highly recommend checking it out because I just know that a lot of the designers for Tim will have a ton of cards. I'm excited to see the samples because it always blows my mind every year. Everyone is so creative and I just love it. So highly recommend checking that out. I will have links to the set. I will have links to all the supplies I used. I'll have a link to my blog post in the description box below the video, so you can check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping, commenting, all of it. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!